After emerging from more than 3 decades of civil war in the 90s, Guatemala is a nation still struggling across many fronts. Despite steady economic growth and middle-income country status, it has some of the most alarming food insecurity in the Western Hemisphere. Its youngest citizens are hit the hardest.
Its stunting rates alone of its children, so that means the children are not getting the right kind of nutrition that they need on a daily basis to reach the level of height that they should be for their age, is some of the most alarming in the world.
Also alarming is the country's income inequality. The top fifth of the population controls roughly 60% of Guatemala's wealth, while the bottom fifth owns just 3%. Most of the poor are rural and indigenous families who depend on agriculture to survive. Guatemala's exposure to recurrent natural hazards and climate change is the highest in the region.
The forced resignation and arrest of President Otto Perez Molina.
President Otto Perez Molina is accused of taking part in a multi-million-dollar bribery operation.
All this indicates the seriousness of the political crisis.
The country's government, which has long been plagued by corruption, has failed to meet the most basic needs of its citizens. Its very low tax base has led to inadequate public spending on social and health services and on infrastructure to support the economy. In rural areas, there are only 3 healthcare workers for every 10,000 people. Another significant problem for residents in those communities has been the lack of local support to improve crop yields and income.
There's no permanent agriculture extension service in Guatemala. So that means with every election cycle, they spend the first year within the Ministry of Agriculture looking for and recruiting ag extension agents that may or may not have the skill set needed for the job. Then they spend the second year training them to ensure that they do have the skill set. So the third year, they are actually starting to reach out to rural populations and giving them the education and the skill sets that they need so they can grow better crops. And the fourth year, those ag extension agents, which are political appointees, are oftentimes campaigning in the next election cycle.
That lost time teaching better agriculture practices has had a compounding negative impact on the most vulnerable of Guatemala's population. Guatemala is one of 19 Feed the Future countries around the world, one of only 3 in the Western Hemisphere. The U.S. government program in the Central American nation includes participation from USAID, USDA, and Peace Corps. 11 agencies overall are involved in the global effort. Its zone of influence is in the Western Highlands, where 10% of the country's population lives.
In that area, you see 76% of families are in poverty. 26% or so are extreme poverty. 2/3 of the children are stunted. A majority are indigenous populations, and most haven't completed any primary school education.
With an annual budget of $12 to $18 million, the initiative aims to reduce poverty by 15% and stunting by 12% in the Western Highlands.
It's a pretty ambitious program overall, trying to address some incredibly serious development challenges.
USAID has a long history of working on food security in Guatemala, but predominantly through direct food aid. The strategy of Feed the Future, which started in 2010, places an emphasis on agricultural production activities to address the root causes of hunger, poverty, and malnutrition. More than a dozen programs receive funding from the initiative, including the Rural Value Chains Project, which aims to increase employment, incomes, and nutrition. Another program, NutriSalud, improves the nutritional status of women and children in more than 2,000 communities. In late October of 2016, Kimberly Flowers and Reid Hamel of the Center for Strategic and International Studies Global Food Security Project traveled to Guatemala to meet with project and government officials and also program beneficiaries, including Mariano Hernandez Gonzalez and his daughter Dina.
Ya hemos logrado algo porque yo anteriormente me salían.
He is a participant in the Ana Café project, which helps farmers cultivate and sell their coffee while maintaining the health of their plantations. The program also teaches effective methods of crop diversification to counter coffee price volatility. Gonzalez explained that before enrolling in the program, he'd have to travel to Mexico every year to find work to support his family. Now he can stay at home and tend to his own crops, thanks to the training and help he has received.
One of my favorite parts of the trip is sitting down and talking with smallholder farmers who produce coffee. And Guatemala is the 8th leading coffee exporter in the world. 40% of that is purchased by the United States. And Feed the Future programs work specifically with smallholder farmers. In fact, last year alone, Feed the Future farmers who work in coffee increased sales by 32 million. That's impressive.
Other Feed the Future projects range from increasing access to quality seeds of improved disease-resistant bean varieties to scaling up software technology to track export processing. They also teach communities how to improve nutrition behaviors with community health workers and cooking demonstrations. Agriculture Minister Mario Mendez told the CSIS team that he's grateful for the support from Feed the Future programs, but he'd like Guatemala to see even greater opportunities in the U.S. market.
Sería importante poder crear negocios sólidos donde Guatemala pueda producir diferentes productos que ustedes actualmente están consumiendo, lo cual generaría empleo y riqueza para los guatemaltecos y generaría empleo y riqueza para los norteamericanos también. Entonces,
After 7 years of implementation, policymakers are taking stock of Feed the Future and its accomplishments and challenges. The Global Food Security Project's new report assesses progress and makes recommendations to improve program efficiency and effectiveness.
Some areas that we think could be improved is one, looking at targets. Make sure they're realistic, make sure they're achievable within the country context. We'd like to see an expansion of nutrition programs as well as more of a focus on food and water safety. There could also be better transparency of where the money is going and the progress that it's making thus far. You definitely see a huge improvement both in the lives of smallholder farmers and the lives of children and mothers. So now is not the time to stop.
The future of U.S. government funding for food and nutrition security is uncertain under the new U.S. administration. Sustained resources for Feed the Future is critically important, not only to Guatemala, but also to the United States.
We want our neighboring countries to be stable and secure, whether that has to do with national security or economic growth, because that makes them a better trading partner. That makes them, when they have better economic opportunities, they're less likely to be migrants or to be illegal immigrants and searching for new opportunities. So the more stable that a country is, the better that it's in our national security interest.